One of the most meaningful mission stories of our time is told in a documentary entitled Never the Same, celebrating 50 years since Peace Child. Here's the trailer.
It was 50 years ago when my mother and my father began an unforgettable journey. I was just 7 months old when they moved deep into the jungles of Papua. We made our home among a small tribal group known as the Sawi. My dad learned the language, my mom treated the sick, all with the purpose of telling them about Jesus. But the people did not respond. The Sawi were headhunters. They were cannibals. They lived in a constant state of war. As time passed, we began to lose hope that the gospel would take root. My parents were faced with a decision. Finally, Dad explained to the Sawi that if they kept on fighting, we could no longer stay. But the Sawi were desperate to keep us around, so they finally agreed to make peace with each other. In order for that to happen, each Sawi village gave an infant, a baby boy, to their enemies. And this child became known as the Peace Child. It was through this unexpected exchange, buried deep in their culture, that my parents were given a perfect opportunity to share the gospel with the Sawi, to explain to them that God sent his very own Peace Child, Jesus, to make peace with us. It's been 50 years since that day, and we're very anxious to see how the Sawi are doing.
Two incredible slices of history. One 50 years ago, June 1962. The other just last June. That was narrated by Steve Richardson, the eldest son of one of the most famous missionaries of our time. Don Richardson's writing, his research, his anthropological and linguistic work over 15 years among the Sawi people of Irian Jaya have profoundly impacted global missions and the advance of God's kingdom. As you will see, we have another slice of that documentary coming up. Don Richardson has served as a minister at large for World Teams since 1977, travels and does about 40 conferences a year, and I just can't believe you're right here. Don, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here as your guest.
This is a story I've heard about all of my Christian life. And in fact, these two titles, Peace Child and Eternity in Their Hearts, have so frequently been part of something I've been talking about to someone. And now first to see that's not a reenactment. There was actually a film about what happened 50 years ago.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It was such a joy to go back, and all the memories that came back as I stood among the Sawi people and saw the transformation, and to enjoy that experience with my three sons, who were raised among them, was just such a gift from God.
We're going to, in a few minutes, go to that moment. But I didn't realize you were Canadian. You were born in Charlottetown, PEI.
Yes.
I moved to Victoria, BC at about 10?
Yes. But while we were living on a farm north of Summerside, Prince Edward Island, as a 9-year-old, I was constantly bothered by the same question that one guest after another asked when they came to Sunday dinner. How old are you, lad? I'd say, 9 years old, sir. You're 9 years old. What are you going to be when you grow up? And I got tired of saying, I don't know. And I decided I would ask God to help me find out what I should be when I grew up. So, as we said in Prince Edward Island, when I climbed the wooden hill, went upstairs to bed, before I got into bed one evening, I knelt down by the windowsill, looked out at the stars and said, God, people keep asking me what I'm going to be when I grow up, and I'm tired of saying I don't know. Would you please help me find out? I'd sure appreciate it. And with further thought, I said, and I hope it's something really interesting. And Moira, I sensed peace when I was kneeling by that windowsill praying that prayer. I knew God heard me and I would get his answer. And I did. At 17 years of age, received Jesus as my Lord and Savior in Victoria, British Columbia. And 2 weeks later, heard a missionary speaker for the first time in my life. A few minutes into his message, I remembered praying that prayer, and I knew God was speaking to me through this man. I was called to do what he was talking about somewhere in the world. It was just a question of when and where.
You had no idea it would be to a head-hunting cannibalistic tribe with your wife and baby.
Right. And thank God he found a wife for me, Carol Joy.
Who must have been fearless, Carol Joy.
Yes, well, we were out in New Guinea under a world team, and most of our colleagues were working among the mountain tribes where the temperatures are cool. You can grow vegetables. There wasn't even any malaria in those mountains. But I knew a tribe had been discovered in the swamps far to the south. And I sensed that God was speaking to me, Don, that tribe down there, I know they're cannibals, they're headhunters, don't worry about that. I've taken care of everything, they'll welcome you. I want you to go to them. They're the people I prepared for you to bear witness for me among.
Wow, let's show the folks at home where on the map
yes.
that is. And I needed clarification on this because today it's called Papua. That is not Papua New Guinea, which is on the right of the
Yes,
island.
that's right. The eastern half of the island on the map is Papua New Guinea, and Papua is the western half. And the Sawi are one of 1,000 tribes that live in that entire 1,500-mile
Let's go back
island.
to the map just for a minute because the Sawi people are in the belly of the dinosaur.
Yes.
Do you see the dinosaur shape there? Isn't that cool?
The head is at the western end, tip of the tail at the east, and in the belly of the dinosaur.
Is where you were headed.
3,000 cannibal headhunters living in the swamps, swamps drenched with 7 meters of rainfall a year.
Wow. Okay, the family picture next. And again, Steve, who narrates the documentary,
Yes.
Never the Same, your eldest, was just 7 months old. I bet you that's an MAF plane, is it?
It is, it is, yes.
Fantastic. So what was the welcome like?
Well, I went in first to build a little house.
This is your, what did you call this?
Well, because it looked like a little matchbox beneath the towering jungle trees and had a thatch roof, I nicknamed it our thatch box.
A thatch box, which, by the way, was really unique because the locals lived up a tree.
Yes, they lived in tree houses as high as 40 feet above the ground. And so we lived in a house that was just 6 feet above the ground.
And that's Steve, our narrator, isn't it?
Yes.
As a little guy?
As a little boy.
And you, as a young dad, you would have 3 children there, right? All 3 boys?
Actually, we had 4 children before we came home.
And they were all born there?
Yes, except Stephen was a few months old when we left Canada.
Okay. So I was asking about the reception.
Yes. When I went back with my wife and son in that dugout canoe, a 10-hour journey, came around the last bend of the river as the sun was setting and saw 400 men, women, and children massed on the riverbank between the little house and the edge of the water.
Now, is this last, are you talking
This
about?
was 50 years ago.
Okay, yeah, right. So
Okay.
it
Came
wasn't
around-
threatening.
Well, actually, we got closer. As the sun eased beyond the horizon, I saw that all the men had war paint on and were holding weapons. And I didn't say anything to Carol. I just let her think they always looked that way, but I was wondering, are these even the same friendly guys who helped me build my little house? Or are these hostile people that have replaced them and have something else in mind?
Do we look good enough to eat?
Are they here to welcome us to dinner or to be dinner? Well, there was nothing to do but get out of the canoes, walk up onto the shore with Stephen in my arm, leading Carol. They closed in all around us so tightly we could hardly move, Moira, and their eyes were gleaming with excitement, but they were totally silent, as if waiting for a signal. Well, someone did shout a signal, Asa! At that signal, they all began leaping in the air, brandishing their weapons and shouting for joy. And they danced around us to the beat of their drums. We were escorted up to the front steps of the little house. We climbed the steps, went inside. When I closed the door behind us, Moira, they kept pounding on their drums all night long, dancing around us in the house. They'd been hearing for a couple of years very positive reports about unusually tall, unusually pale, sickly-looking people called Tuans, European types.
Tuans, T-U-A-N.
Yes, and so they'd been hoping that a Tuan would choose to come and live among them, and they were forewarned that'll never happen. They're a scarce commodity, not enough Tuans for every tribe to have one, let alone every village. But the Sawi realized I was a Tuan, and my wife Carol, a Nyonya, and a little baby Tuan, little Stephen. So that meant that we would bring obat, meaning medicine, and steel tools to replace stone axes, nylon fish line and fish hooks. So they were eagerly welcoming us. And of course, I had to learn their language. Without the help of a published grammar, without an already published dictionary, and without a bilingual language instructor. To begin, Moira, I stood among the people down by the river even while the celebration was commencing around our house the next day, and began pointing at things, hoping a Sawi man would understand I wanted him to give me a word in his language for whatever I pointed at. I pointed at a man, a woman, a child. They said, "Ridig, ridig, ridig."
Oh, no.
A dog, a fish, a pig, ridig, ridig, ridig. By then I was saying, Lord, have you led me halfway around the world to learn a language that has only one word? Then I realized ridig meant finger.
Oh.
It is not their body language to point with one finger.
Oh.
So I had to point with my lips. Then I began to accumulate nouns, mimicked actions to get verbs, and within a year gained fluency.
Isn't that amazing?
In their language by studying it intensely every day.
You would end up doing a New Testament
Yes.
translation in Sawi,
Yes.
9 primers?
Yes, actually 19 primers.
19, sorry, you're right.
To help them learn to read their language. They didn't know the language could be put in written form.
But this, everything that was accomplished was nearly shipwrecked by their...
Something that I discovered in Sawi culture, in addition to practicing cannibalism and headhunting, having no knowledge of judges, jails, policemen, or law courts, anything in the outside world that could try to shape their behavior, they also honored treachery as a virtue.
They thought Judas was a good guy
When I told them
in the New
about
Testament.
Judas using a kiss of friendship to fatten his victim, Jesus, they thought, he's a master of treachery. We never thought of kissing our victim at the moment of truth. They said, Don, that man named Judas has done us one better.
Dear.
And I sat among them praying, Lord, help, I need a gift of wisdom here. We all know what the Bible says. If any man lack wisdom, let him take a further course in seminary. It really
Let
says,
him ask of
let
God.
him ask of God, who often does lead an asker to study on a campus somewhere. But God does have the prerogative to grant a gift of wisdom on the spot, as needed, where needed. And believe me, I needed his help.
And they wanted you so badly to stay.
Yes.
Not to leave as you threatened.
But 2 villages that had moved out of the deep forest, built new homes near our home, had been at war previously. They were hoping they would forget about unsettled grudges and live at peace. It didn't work. There was such animosity. Insults were shouted. Arrows began to flash through the air right past the windows of our home. Men were being wounded at our door. And I kept pleading with them to make peace. And they kept saying, you ask us to make peace as if that should be an easy thing to do. As far as we know, you Tuans never war with each other. You don't understand what it's like to be Sawi. And I thought, when I discovered their idealization of treachery, of course, making peace requires some basis for mutual trust. How can there be mutual trust when each side in a conflict is well aware of the other side's potential to use something like a peace offer as a setup for a greater slaughter? And I said to my wife, Carol, honey, it appears God has commissioned us to serve him in the midst of a culture that is lacking in any means of conflict resolution. It's violence and vengeance and counter-vengeance without end.
And that's when they suggested the peace child. We have to move along a little quickly.
Yes.
We saw the exchange.
Yes.
But you call these now cultural compasses.
That's right.
Redemptive analogies that Eternity in Our Hearts says is in every culture.
I went on to find examples of these things around the world.
You've got to
Library
look for it.
research, yes.
And these offer that entryway for the gospel.
That's right.
In this case, the divine peace child who brings reconciliation to all men, the barriers coming down. That tribe today, well, 5 tribes would greet you in the
Yes.
piece we're about to see now.
Because with the help of John and Esther Mills, other Canadians, we evangelized the Sawi, completed the translation of the New Testament, taught them to read it, also taught them to read the national language of the nation that they didn't even know they were citizens of. So they used the national language after we left to reach out to 4 other tribes.
So these former cannibals, headhunters, are evangelists for Jesus Christ today.
Yes.
I mean, pinch yourself as you watch this moving slice from Never the Same.
Normally you wouldn't hear someone say, "It's great to see so many old people." Disease took its toll. Death from warfare took its toll. But now to come back and see that there are just throngs among the crowds of people, throngs of people with gray hair and old enough that they have trouble walking along the trail, that's a special joy.
So they've reached out and they've invited, I think, 5 tribes around them. So they're making themselves a base because something really significant happened among them. And it seems like this has been implanted in the hearts of the Sawi, that they aren't meant to just sit around enjoying Christ and getting fat and happy. The whole point is to reach out and share it with others. So they're doing that. We're seeing it in action.
He's explaining he's from a remote village, and after the Bible was translated, someone brought the scriptures to him, and he believed. Isaac. He's taken a Christian name called Isaac.
They really rolled out the red carpet. Hundreds and hundreds of people from 5 different tribes were here. And for me, the emotion was just overwhelming. I think one of the things that struck me, maybe the most, was how many people grabbed my hand or gave me a hug, often with tears in their eyes, and said that they had been my close friend or playmate when I was little. And I was surprised how many of the older people are still alive who actually witnessed my parents' arrival. So it's amazing to see the legacy of God's grace through my parents in their obedient step of faith 50 years ago.
Can you see why this is so profound? Never the Same, celebrating 50 years since Peace Child. You can see it at www.pioneers.org. Carol died in 2004 after a courageous battle with cancer.
Yes.
But how meaningful to go with 3 of your 4 children, your 3 boys, Steve, Shannon, and Paul, who's been here many times, to see so many faces from 50 years ago.
Yes.
You know, as a 77-year-old today, to go back and see the fruit of your labor, your love, your investment. And this isn't the whole story. Tell us quickly about the baptisms, the baby dedications, and the marriages.
50 people were prepared to be baptized, but as we were baptizing them, hundreds of people on the shore said, "I want to be baptized too. I've been a Christian for years. No one came to my village to baptize me. I want to be baptized now." So we kept baptizing, and 25 at a time, more than 300 people.
325 were baptized.
Yes.
102 couples married.
A mass wedding. Some of them were couples that had been married for years but wanted to reaffirm their vows with a Christian wedding.
And 130 babies were dedicated.
Yes.
You must have been overwhelmed.
You know, Moira, 2 out of every 3 babies born to Sawi mothers in the old days did not even reach 5 years of age. A 2/3 infant mortality. But now the villages are full of children because of the hygiene that my wife Carol taught them. And by the way, I'm remarried to another woman named Carol.
Oh, your new wife.
My first wife was Carol Joy. My second wife is Carol Joyce. And she and I are traveling constantly, teaching, and she sings and teaches in missions conference with me around the world.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
I want to say, too, it's so moving. One of the peace babies one peace child delivered to the enemy chief became the first graduate of higher education.
Yes.
A Christian Teacher Training College. He is now a primary school principal.
Yes.
And other sons of former headhunters are following in his footsteps.
That's right, more and more.
Johannes? Is that how you say
He
it?
took the name Johannes, which is John in the Indonesian language.
This is a miracle story. How do we get this to America right now?
Well, I'm doing my best, speaking in missions conferences in many nations and teaching people. I just came from Kona, Hawaii, teaching 40 missionary candidates going out to different nations. But you're helping too here at 100 Huntley Street as you interview my son Paul and me and other missionaries. Thank God for the witness of this television program.
Your children all serving the Lord. We know 2 of the boys are in Indonesia.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Well, I hope God brings you back. This is a moment in history for me. I say now I'm ready for heaven. I've met Don Richardson.
Oh my.
And these are Christian classics. Peace Child, over 400,000 in print, and Eternity in Their Hearts, more than 230,000 sold. These need to be in your library, and they are at our e-store, crossroads.ca or 1-800-265-3100. In the wake of devastating violence and loss and concern about our culture, it's good to see the power of the gospel lift. Jesus can do this again. The divine peace child. I hope you've been encouraged.